Thank you all for joining us today for Tracy Schott's Voices for Change show. We are dedicated to putting an end to intimate partner violence, shortcut IPV. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, producer of the show on the Incandescent Radio Network and Incandescent TV, and I promise that today you are in for a fascinating conversation. Tracy, of course, is the producer and director of the award-winning film Finding Jenn's Voice. It shines a light on IPV, and she partnered with the India-based organization Jenn to take her message global. We're thrilled to have the co-founder of Jenn as today's guest. Paul Singh is coming to us near Mumbai, India, and without further ado, I turn it over to Tracy to chat with Paul.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Paul, for joining me today. It's this has been kind of a long time coming. You know, Paul and I have been partnering on this project for almost 2 years now, and we released Voices for Change March 1st, 2020. Talking about the pandemic of intimate partner violence, only to be shut down by COVID-19 pandemic. So it's been a very interesting year. It's required us to pivot a million times, so many times that we feel like our heads are spinning off sometime. And but kind of got us to this place where we're really working in a virtual world, and quite honestly, a podcast and webinar series never would have happened without both Paul and Hope's encouragement. I think that's what we call that, encouragement. Foot in the back end, kind of. So Paul, thanks for being here. You know, Paul comes to us from this technical background, but he's got one of the biggest hearts of anybody I know. And Paul, I'd like you to just start a little bit by talking about Jenn and how you came about. I know you were just recently recognized in India for your team's efforts. Tell us all about Jenn.
Thank you, Tracy, for your kind words, and Hope for that very nice introduction. Pleasure to be here. I know most of the time our collaboration has been behind the scenes, so it's a very different feeling today.
You're on the hot seat today.
I know how it feels for you, right? Of course, but no, it's a privilege and pleasure to be talking about our collaboration. It's such an important work that we are part of, and which is essentially, you know, the essence of Jenn as an entity, as a company. So the backstory is, you know, I'm an engineer, trained engineer, and worked in industrial, zone for a long time. Did some career shift, and you know, was looking for new opportunities. And you know, I figured out, like, okay, I like problem solving. Complex the problem, you know, gets the better out of me. So feel like, so, you know, myself being an element that I'm solving a system-wide change. And as a result of that, I feel like, you know, a lot of Fortune 100 companies benefited through my 20 plus years of experience for that, and reached a point in career in life where there wasn't fun for me. There was nothing new to learn. Like, you know, making a, you know, company make more profit, which is already, you know, profitable, was an interesting problem to solve. So turn of events and a lot of serendipity, I came across a United Nations Charter, which is 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Essentially, you know, United Nations said, well, these are the 17 areas that if we could address it by year 2030, like, you know, zero hunger, no poverty, climate action, gender equality, you know, we can make a world a better place, our planet a more sustainable place to live for the coming generations. And that was sort of an aha moment for me, that, well, that's the next frontier for problem solving. As an engineer in me was, you know, say, okay, yeah, I want to play a role in there. But I think the hardest part was, how do you create a business model while doing good in the world, like you make enough money to pay your bills. And that's sort of an entrepreneur's dream space to operate in. But I've been so fortunate that I crossed paths with, some peers, some coworkers, some people I used to work with in my previous capacity that believed in the idea that we could do both, right? We could do good for the planet, we can solve these complex issues, and we can make it into a sustainable business model. And that's how we started. And it's been 3 years journey, and fortunate to have a team which is now growing in India, in US, and in Europe. And we have great partners like yourself. And through that collaborative effort, I think we've been, I would say we've taken some strides on the journey of reaching the milestones for year 2030. And so we do a lot of technology work, but it's applied to a context, right? It's not like building an app for more likes, more hits, or showing your favorite meals of the day. But it's a technology applied to a problem context, a system context, where we could actually create a positive change, a ripple change. And that to me is actually it sort of serves everything, right? It's satisfy the needs and engineer in me, the techie in me, and also I go to bed, thinking that, oh, I did something meaningful today. And so applying those skills into a meaningful context and surrounded by creative, passionate people, I mean, that's what OneGen is today.
Well, you have a wonderful team. I remember at one point on you're a tech team, so your website is always transforming and doing something new. But at one point, you had a tagline that said "Transforming the world in one generation." Is that where the name of the company came from?
That's really you basically said it, yeah. So OneGen stands for, it's a short form for how do you transform the world in one generation. And so it's the generation that is in probably kindergarten now or in elementary schools that we need to focus on. And that's the generation that's going to inherit this planet, with all its prosperity and the promises as well as the challenges. So we want to sort of focus on that. In one generation, how do we solve these complex challenges? And so that's why the name came about. Absolutely, you got it.
Well, you do have a great team. I've been privileged to work with several of them, and it's it can be very humbling. When I'm talking to people from OneGen, and then I pop on your website to see who your new clients are, and it's like you guys are all over the place. Tell us about some of the other work you're doing, and then we'll dive into Voices for Change.
It's not a reality is not very far from your thought that in the initial years, I'll be lying if I said we had a business strategy and we knew what we were doing. So we were all over the place, but then we sort of got more comfortable with the thought that it's okay, because this is a huge planet and the size of the problems facing it are huge. So we need to sort of go wide as well as go deep. So, but lately we've been a little bit more focused on it, and that's some of the learnings we had along the way. And we've been able to also understand the dynamics of different things, how shifting change in one area can impact a lot of things, right? I'll give you an example. One of the Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 5, in which our work sort of slightly fits into gender equality, right? That's one goal that we have. But you can't really address that thing unless you have, access to quality education and good mental well-being right around it, which is other SDGs. But you can't have that thing. We're working on a project in south of India. That state particularly has a very high dropout rate for girl students. They drop out of middle school, high school, as soon as they reach the puberty age, just because there are no clean toilet facilities in those schools, right? And because of that, they just miss so much school that essentially there's no incentive for them to go back. And So the clean water, sanitation, and hygiene is part of quality education, which kind of leads to gender equality. So there's these intricacies and interactions between different things we do. So on surface, sometimes it feels like that we are all over the place and we are investing into climate action, gender equality, solving the zero hunger problem, and finding uh, good employment opportunities for the nano entrepreneurs. So it seems very disjointed on surface, but the underlying two things that binds them together. One, they all work on great digital platform, which is there's a connectedness, there's a data, there is a context that is understanding the dynamics between different stakeholders on the system. And the second thing that binds them together is that it's tied to education of the younger generation. So and especially girls' childhood. So I think they were focused on education of young girls, especially in developing economies. Sort of we feel that that's the critical point, that if we invest there, a lot of other things sort of take care of itself.
Right.
So those are the areas that we're investing in right now.
Well, it takes me back to my social work roots where, I was trained at Berkeley, and we talked a lot about systems theory and how what happened within a person, within a single individual just multiplied, and we were all connected. And this whole idea of that you can never draw really a straight line to a problem to fix it. You have to think circular. You have to think about all the various things that impact a problem, and all of the things, all of those. How many is it? 17 UN?
Yeah, 17 goals. Yeah.
17 goals. Each of those 17 goals is connected to the other in some way.
Absolutely.
And so it's, whenever I have the opportunity to show Finding Jenn's Voice to a live audience, which of course hasn't happened in quite some time, people say to me, I'm so outraged. What do we do to stop intimate partner violence and homicide? Like everybody can do something. Everybody has a role to play, because there's so many layers to the problem, and a lot of it has to do with gender inequality and patriarchy. But there's a reason that developing economies have an even worse problem with gender violence, and that has to do with education and financial opportunity and dependency. And I know I'll give a little bit away about the webinar we're doing tomorrow. One of the people who's on the webinar is a young woman from Plan International, which is a children's charitable organization that is in 52 countries around the world. And they've been around for almost 100 years. And what they're finding is, since the pandemic, with the increase in lockdowns, increase in financial instability, that child marriages are going up. Violence is going up. A return to female genital mutilation is going up. All of these problems that organizations have been working toward progress there's been a backslide because of the economy. So everything is connected, and I think it's awesome that the work that you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about Voices for Change. I think I've told the story before. I think Pooja was on a few months ago, and we talked about how I met you at a conference in Philadelphia.
Good Pitch Philadelphia, yeah?
Yeah, Good Pitch Philadelphia. And Good Pitch is an organization that brings together media makers and people who are interested in changing the world, people with resources. They kind of bring all these people together in the same room, and then certain organizations pitch their projects, and then people jump on. And I was there as an observer. and Kelly, my consultant, Kelly Devine, introduced me to you. And do you want to talk a little bit about that meeting? It was this real serendipitous kind of experience.
I remember, I think it was towards the second half of the day during the drinks break. So we met near the, where everybody was sort of getting their cups filled. And that's where we met and we started talking about, and you briefly mentioned about your project. And I think my first question was, did I miss it? Like, I thought like probably you pitched it because the way you were, and that was the other side of the good pitch, right? But no, I think it was probably less than 15 minutes when like we were building on each other's ideas. And imagine if there was a platform where the film could spark discussions and we could sort of essentially, bring in survivor voices and their experiences to, you know, um, raise awareness. But I still remember, I think the operative word was mostly like, how do you give hope to somebody that doesn't see the, any light at the end of the tunnel, who's going through it right now?
Right.
And so to me, that was sort of the starting point for how do we focus and converge everything we know in digital space, social media, web portal, building communities online, forums, and using the video streaming capabilities and cloud computing infrastructure that we had built by the time. How do we sort of leverage that and, the concept that you had drawn on a napkin, I guess, to take it to reality and called Voices for Change.
Yeah.
So I know Finding Jenn's Voice had its own web presence, but then we wanted to build an ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
To me, that the hope and ecosystem, I was sold on the idea that okay, we gotta do something about it. And few months later, we sort of started collaborating on a weekly basis, and hence the site was launched. Less than 9 months of work together, I guess.
Yeah.
In March of 2020. But this was. I feel like when there were forces at play that sort of brought that until now I never actually recalled that event because I always felt like I've known you for years, seeing your work, and and since then. Every time our Philadelphia coffee chats and lunch chats, I mean, there's always I leave with more ideas after every time meeting you.
Yeah.
And
I've always come at these meetings like, all right, I'm not taking on anything else. And then I leave. I'm like, oh, we're going to do this and this and this. It's kind of like talking to Hope where she's like, oh, you're going to write a book. And I'm like, oh, right, sure, my spare time. But, one of the things I remember is one of your coworkers at the time, Jim, had seen my film when we were talking. And he looked at you and said, that's the film I was telling you about this morning. And you just spontaneously hugged me.
It was such a synchronicity, right? That Jim and I, in the early days of Vanjan, we were collaborating and we were brainstorming some ideas. And he used to do some, volunteer work for a shelter home in Wisconsin. And he mentioned about the film, and a few hours later, we are like standing next to the filmmaker and having that conversation. So it was like the distance between the intention and manifestations are kind of reducing.
Just all came together.
I'm still having those goosebump moments. That it's the resonance, and I think Tracy, that's the best way to explain it. I mean, collaboration. I know it's we sort of figure out a way to make 1 + 1 = 11. But I think the work on Voices for Change has never seemed like work to me. And I speak for several tech team members at Vanjan as well, because it's always been a mission. It's always been, that there's such a resonance between the film, the training program around it, the awareness program, and especially how we collated all of the survivor stories and their blog updates.
Right.
So for me, it was always like, how do we amplify this thing? So like your work needs to be shown to many people, and those voices need to be heard. And so our role has been sort of be the amplifier for voices for change and right in that
Well,
right
you
way.
guys think you all think big, and I I used to think I think big until I started talking to you, and now I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think big enough. But there have been so many times where I'm like, I don't have time for this anymore. Okay, I'm just it's probably run its course, and it hasn't run its course. The reality is, I released Finding Jen's Voice in 2015, and in the 6 years since I released the film, the problem of intimate partner violence and homicide has only gotten worse. And sadly, the film is needed now more than ever. So your team has always had that kind of recognition, and it's easy to kind of lose sight of that when, especially when you're a filmmaker and it's your project. You're like, all right, I'm done with that. I'm over it. let me do a film about food.
I think with as you said, with pandemic, sort of a bad situation got worse, right?
Yeah.
With statistics show that a lot of case studies are coming up across the globe, right? That it seems like my hypothesis is more of a pressure cooker situation in a lockdown. So that leads to the undesirable outcomes in the IPV domain. And it goes back to, and I think pandemic only amplified, and pandemic only, I think, threw a brighter strobe light at the problem, and also sort of highlighted that whatever we've been doing, it's more of a band-aid, right? We're treating the symptoms. And in your words, like if you go back to the fundamentals of system theory, you gotta go layers below and try to understand, why does it happen? And when does it start? This difference between or treatment of fellow human beings or peers based on gender differences. When does it first start, right? And what role our education system plays in that? What role social norms play in that? The construct, the language we take for granted, some of the constructs are needing some revision these days, and a lot of work is happening in that space, right? So you really need to understand the problem in its core sense, right? What it is, and then it boils up to, of course, and I still sort of remember a couple of things from the film, but the thing that kind of struck me was in an instant was that the number one cause of death is homicide for pregnant women. That was sort of intriguing enough for me to sort of explore the subject with you on that. Yeah, so I feel that yes, pandemic has made the situation more drastic, but also sort of I think it has started conversations in terms of that we need to do things differently. We need to think things differently. One organization probably can do a fantastic job of creating a shelter home, creating resources, maybe retraining the victims or survivors, and we can train the law enforcement and medical professionals to do better in their job, to assess or read the red flags better. Nothing wrong with that, right? But we need to do much more than that. And how do you create a game that a stakeholder ecosystem where we could share information more openly, we could be more transparent, we can sort of create that multiplier effect. I love that, as you mentioned earlier. And that's where I think that this work has much more meaning for me and One Jen, is because I believe that technology could be that X factor, the multiplying factor, where we could connect people, like tomorrow we will be connecting people from different time zones with different research work and all things, but coming together, thanks to technology. So technology has immense potential to address some of these complex issues if we package and leverage it in the right context. And I think our journey for the last 2+ years has been sort of a great example in the mind of, when you apply technology in the right context, you could you could move things for positive change.
I want to talk about one of the next steps that we're going to be working on soon. And when I first decided I was doing this documentary film, I went to a conference in New York and saw a project that was being presented of this woman who did a documentary film, but instead of putting it together in kind of a 2-hour format or whatever, put it together in little segments, and then it was interactive. So she put it on a website so that people could go on and share their experiences via FaceTime or audio, and it became this interactive, and it had nothing to do with gender violence. It was another topic completely. And I thought, wow, that would be really cool if we did something like that for survivors of domestic violence. And then I got sidetracked trying to like fund and create the film, which took 4 years. But one of the things that I have learned from showing the film to thousands of people is that while the research is stunning and the researchers that are there who speak are the top of their game, it's the survivor stories that move the needle. It's the survivor stories that it resonates with people, that sticks with people, and is ultimately the change maker. It's the reason the film has gotten the attention it has. It's not because of my great filmmaking skills. It's because of those 11 women who shared their personal stories. So we've been talking about bringing those survivor stories to the website, and we've provided opportunities for survivors to write a blog and share that online. But one of the things that we realize, and certainly I realize at this stage of the game, is that not a lot of people are comfortable writing. More people are comfortable just kind of telling their stories. And so we're embracing the technology to make that happen. You want to talk a little bit about what's coming?
Absolutely, absolutely, right. So, and I think there's a scientific reasoning behind your last statement, right? Um, Fact is, yeah, stories do connect us, stories move us, stories inspire us, and we want to tell those stories with authenticity and with positive outcomes on it, right? Being a survivor itself, there's an element of two steps towards happy ending. So, but reading it, and I think this is probably how technology, the dark side of technology, has done to us in modern times, that our attention span is so low that we can only read like Instagram, like post, or bite-sized information, right? Research papers needs commitment. Data charts need commitment. So you need to package the information in a different way. So hence, I think your recommendation, and this is sort of our next phase of work together, is that how do we capture and share those stories in audio and video format in a more interactive way, like you described the New York example, right? So we want to give an open and inviting sort of environment for survivors where they feel safe, where they are encouraged to share their stories with the hope and intention that hearing their stories might give somebody else courage to take a corrective action, right? And that's the domino effect we want to create through building this online community, which is multimedia interactive, but keeping the positivity, hope, and authenticity kind of as the guiding principles to design this environment. And that's really the work we are currently doing. We are at one side raising awareness through our wonderful digital tour this year. So what travel is not very practical. We want to touch base in those 12 cities and discuss those 12 important topics. But on the other side, we are learning from each one of these conversations and engagement, and that's the learning that is getting digitized as we speak, in the form of Voices for Change 2.0, if I may say that. So our vision is that one place where not only you can find resources, knowledge portals, or
Oh no. Oh no, I think we just lost Paul. So technology, from across the world. So I imagine he'll be joining us again, but I'm going to finish his statement, and that is that I'm really excited for this next phase of Voices for Change 2.0, where it's really been part of the mission statement that I put together is, to provide training, educational content, but also to connect people to the research and the resources, but primarily to amplify the voices of Paul is texting me, to amplify the voices of survivors. And that has been incredibly important. So Paul just texted me. They had a power outage, and it generally takes about 2 minutes before it reboots. So it's okay. I can talk for 2 minutes. Easy, obviously.
Tracy, will you talk a little bit about the webinar tomorrow?
Yeah. So tomorrow's webinar. So we did a webinar a month ago, and this has been a virtual tour where we're going to different cities around the country. The first one was based outside of Philadelphia, where I'm based in Pennsylvania. The second one was based in Houston and Austin, Texas. The third one was based in New Orleans. This next one is based in the world. So we talked the last time about the shadow pandemic and how it impacted the survivors and the ability of organizations to provide services and how it impacted healthcare. So it was very much a kind of a boots on the ground examination of how the pandemic impacted intimate partner violence intervention. This next one, we're also talking shadow pandemic, but it's a global perspective. And we're going to be talking with a woman, Dr. Nandita Gandhi, who is based in India and runs an organization that is meant to fight intimate partner violence and gender-based discrimination in India. So she's joining us, and it's very much a policy and organization. We have, as I mentioned earlier, Plan International joining us, who's going to be giving us a perspective of these 52 member organizations around the world, 52 different countries, talking about how the pandemic and lockdowns have impacted rates of intimate partner violence. And then we also have Dr. Manisha Shah, who is a UCLA professor, a researcher who completed one of the first research studies over the last year measuring rates of intimate partner violence. So there's been a lot of speculation from day one. The minute the lockdowns happened, UN Women and the World Health Organizations were both like, this is going to be very scary for particularly women who are in intimate partner violence relationships, because they're really locked down with their abusers and their access to support services is going to be really limited. And so Dr. Shah is actually going to be showing us some of the research that kind of validates that. But we're really taking a global lens. Paul is also going to be joining us tomorrow, and he's going to be talking a little bit about using the digital technologies to address these issues. And, Paul always brings a spark of hope to every conversation. So it's good to always end with that because it can get a little depressing working in this field. When you see the numbers and you see that the numbers are climbing and not going down, it can feel overwhelming and hopeless. Paul reminds us that there are solutions for everything. So, Paul, welcome back.
Sorry about that. The other side of technology, yes. So,
Yeah.
As I was explaining the wonderful and amazing things that are to expect in the next few months about Voices for Change, but essentially, I think it would be a learning environment with a lot of access to resources and access to stories. so that there could be this portal could be viewed as a place for hope. And that's really the intention behind designing a system like that. And I know that it's very easy to sometimes get digitally and get into bits and bytes and think of it as a mobile app or a web app or a zeros and ones. But I think behind the data, behind the technology, we always strive to sort of hear these stories and and get inspired by that. Like if our work could save one more life or actually give somebody hope, and they could actually give hope to 10 other people, I think that would be worthwhile effort from a
The
technology investment perspective.
the stories of survivors do so many things. They move people, they educate, they put a human face on statistics. So much that those stories do for advancing our efforts to fighting intimate partner violence. However, they also do one more thing, and that my experience in working with survivors in finding Jenn's voice, and since then, is the giving the microphone to a survivor of intimate partner violence is giving her back her power. It is saying, this is your story. You own the story. You can do what you want with this story. And if she so chooses and wants to share that story in this very public format, everybody comes away from it going, I feel like I just shed layers of anger, guilt, frustration, depression, that they come out of that experience stronger. And so for me, I see this giving survivors an opportunity, and it's not for everybody. And for some people, it's not safe. They've got to make choices based on their own feelings of safety. But most survivors are pretty good at judging their level of safety. For me, it's just really gratifying to see the technology actually act almost therapeutically. As you know, I was a therapist way back when, and ultimately all of these efforts do come out of the desire for individual and personal growth for people as well. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see how the team pulls it together. I always come out with these ideas, and they're like, yeah, give us a couple of weeks to play with this. Hey, we're thinking about this. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. So yeah, it's an incredibly talented team that I work with at One Jenn. And congratulations, shouting out to the whole team for the award that you guys received. So well deserved. I can't remember exactly what organization gave you that recognition.
So it's actually a digital innovation magazine that looks at all the startups and the young companies that are doing some creative work, innovative work. And so through that framework, there was a process through which they found out that some of the things we're doing is pretty innovative. So they sort of named us an innovative startup of the year 2021. So that was very cool, and I think very encouraging to the team always. Recognition feels good. Going back to the origin story of One Jenn, like first year, when Pooja and I we started this, like we were experimenting and figuring things out. We didn't have like a plan or like a blueprint for what we're gonna do. Like it was like as things are coming, we should basically saying go with the flow and make the most out of the opportunities. And so along the way, you meet fascinating people, partners, and you build onto each other's ideas. Because I did not know about the subject, until I met you, and I still would be saying that I'm an observer, and I'm something that someone that actually understands or tries to understand the complexities involved in the stories behind the intimate partner violence. But really, to understand a subject, like you need somebody who's deep in it, right? Who's living it, right? Who's creating stories out of it. So that's where I think it's a true partnership model that sort of comes in, and that's sort of the essence of our working model, which is we'll do the tech and everything that is around it. Like we'll do that. We know what to do that part, and you just lead the way, and then that's how we try to create magic. And so coming up with some sort of like an award or recognition that something that you're doing is meaningful, it matters, is just kind of recharges your batteries, right? So, okay, all right, bring it on. What's next? And that's the approach they're taking in the coming years. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to everybody, and it's been a great experience for me working with One Jen, and yeah, it's really kind of these kind of collaborations. I really encourage people to do more of it. When you work all by yourself, everybody likes to talk about working in silos, but it's more than that. It's very isolating and it's limiting. The work that we're doing here in 2021 is a direct result of your team's innovation and push to do this stuff. So, that's how change happens, is through organizations working together, encouraging each other. And so I appreciate your encouragement, Paul, and your encouragement as well, Hope. You've been pushing me in other ways as well. And yeah, so here we are.
Well, the work you're doing is so fantastic and so important. So congratulations to you, Paul, on your big award. That's wonderful. And tell us, just as we leave today, tell us how people can participate or watch the webinar. And also, Tracy, before we go, tell us about our next guest.
Right. Who's our next guest? Janine.
So I'll go first. I think anybody who's listening to this conversation, or gets a chance to visit Voices for Change, see the film if you get a chance, Finding Jenn's Voice, because I feel before we change our behaviors, before we take a step towards any major change in a system that we live in, getting to know and awareness is the first step. So I think people watching this, or people getting to know more about Voices for Change, about Tracy's work, about the shadow pandemic around the intimate partner violence, the pandemic behind the pandemic that is going on. I think just understanding that and talking about it and not pushing it under the rug is the first step towards behavior change. So I hope that this conversation gives a little bit of spark of hope to people that there's a lot of light in the world. So yes, sometimes these numbers and sometimes these horrific stories can sort of draw a lot of darkness around us, but always remember we are farmers of light, and just continue doing continue telling great stories, one story at a time. Happy to be here. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Paul. The webinar can be, you can get the information from our website, voicesforchange.net, and it will be broadcast live on Facebook on our Finding Jenn's Voice Facebook page, as well as we're going to be putting it on LinkedIn, I think through One Jen's channel, and then we are also going to be live on YouTube. There's a place to register, which will send you, direct information and reminders and all that fun stuff if you do go online and register. There is a Voices for Change YouTube channel, and you'll see that broadcasting live tomorrow. So multiple places to watch. And if you miss it live, it will be 1 p.m. Eastern time. No, I'm sorry. Wrong. That's wrong thing. 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, 4:30 p.m. Great Britain time, and 9 p.m. in India. And I have to remember that because our people are from all of those places. So
finding
one time for all of us was like, this is challenging. But it is exciting, and it will be recorded. The edited version will be available on my YouTube channel, and there'll be links to that through voicesforchange.net as well. And if you go on voicesforchange.net, you can access the last few webinars we've done. And on our YouTube channel, there's a whole playlist of all of these really fun podcasts that we've had. The next one coming up is after my vacation, July 13th, right? And we're going to be talking to Janine Najai David, who is going to be coming to us from London. She's normally based in LA, but she works with Dr. Manisha Shah at the Global Lab Research Institute for Research. And she's got a very interesting story herself. So we're excited to talk with Janine. And then coming up in the future, we've got some more fun people, but you're going to have to wait and hear because I'm still nailing down their times. We are taking a little bit lighter schedule over the summer to accommodate me and my schedule. But so we're going to be on about twice a month for podcasts through the summer, and then hopefully get back up to weekly in the fall. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tracy.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul. We'll see you all soon. Check out voicesforchange.net with all that details. So have a great day, everybody.